Welcome to the Books Between Friends podcast.
3 lifelong friends,
one shared obsession.
Books.
From epic fantasy to page-turning thrillers.
We dive into the stories we love
And the ones we just can't stop talking about.
So take a seat,
Grab a drink,
and get cozy.
Well, hey, book friends. Welcome to a special bonus episode of Books Between Friends, where we are interviewing debut author Rachel Peterson of Killing Sadie, which comes out August 4th. And as usual, speaking of cozy, what's keeping you cozy these days? And Rachel, would you like to get us kicked off here?
I would love to, and thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here. I would say, given that it is summertime in the Midwest where I am, and I know where you all are as well, cozy is more of a mindset than a physical desire to be any warmer than I am right now. But I would say quality time, enjoying being outside with our dog is keeping me feeling very cozy, and occasionally, literally snuggly, when she feels like it. She's a very fluffy dog, so when she's not overheating herself, being cozy and snuggly with her is bringing me a lot of joy.
What kind of dog is it?
She's a Samoyed. So she is a big white puffball. They're sort of related to Huskies.
Okay.
And yeah, so this is not her season.
Yeah.
And she will let you know. So about 20
She's
minutes
not
outside
happy.
in the morning is enough for her. But she is just the cutest little marshmallow you could possibly imagine.
That's awesome.
Well, for me, good gracious, it is hot in Texas. So cozy usually involves some kind of shade. And so right now, because I, outside of the podcast, I'm a teacher, middle school teacher. And so there's been a lot of in-service training and just to decompress books. And my dog curled up alongside me reading has been keeping me cozy. What about you, Jen?
I think for me, I like to stay home a lot, so
Feel that.
cozy. Yeah, what's keeping me cozy lately is just being home, like on the weekends. After being at work so long all week. Because I feel like, why do we work 5 days? I don't understand.
Fair.
And so having the weekends just to be able to like curl up on the couch, watch TV, read, just like having that time, that's what like really been keeping me cozy lately.
Yeah. Love it.
So for me, staying in the summer theme, it's just been being at the pool, staying cool, and having a book on my Kindle to read at the pool.
Awesome. Perfect.
Love it. All right. Well, like I said, today we do have a special guest, if you haven't noticed. This is a time for firsts. Not only is this Rachel's debut novel, but this is our first guest author on the podcast. So yay. For those of you that don't know, Rachel graduated from Miami University of Ohio with a degree in English and creative writing. Born and raised in Ohio, she started her career in advertising before spending nearly a decade in New York City as a marketing exec for technology companies. An avid traveler, Rachel now splits her time between Manhattan and the Midwest, where she lives with her husband Ken, their dog Olive, and horse Hope. Rachel, we're so excited to have you here. Is there anything else you want to add before we dive into all things Killing Sadie?
No, I think just that I'm equally excited to be here. Thank you all so much for having me. I'm thrilled.
Yay! All right. So, book friends, this interview will be done in 2 different bonus episodes. In our first episode, we will learn more about Rachel and her new novel, Killing Sadie, keeping the conversation spoiler-free. For the second episode, we're going to lean into those spoilers and ask some of our burning questions that we have for Rachel after reading this book. So, with that, I'm going to turn it on over to Steph to get us started.
Okay, so first of all, we just want to say congratulations on publishing your first novel. That's so exciting. Tell us how that feels for you. Like, has it sunk in for you? And like, what made it like really hit? Like, I'm a published author now.
Yes. So I think it has partially sunk in. I have been writing for pretty much as long as I could hold a pen. I knew in second grade that I wanted to be an author. So this really is a lifelong dream that has come through all sorts of twists, turns. As you mentioned, Ethan, I had a whole separate career prior to this that I kind of thought was going to be the lifelong career, and then kept hearing that little voice in my head saying, hey, remember what you really wanted to do when you were a kid? And finally, was gutsy enough to listen to that voice. So now here we are, and it really is remarkable to be living through these things that I dreamed about and imagined in my mind for so long. So I think it really sunk in probably the first time I went to my publisher offices, Simon & Schuster. This was last fall. After the manuscript was done, the edits were done. So the book was complete. Obviously, it would be many moons until it came out into the world. But I arrived and they had a poster of the cover of Killing Sadie.
Oh my gosh.
Hanging up in the
So
conference
cool.
room, and the team was waiting to meet me with broken heart cookies, which, if you've seen the cover of the book, there's a bloody broken heart necklace on the cover.
Yeah.
And just holding that poster up in the Simon & Schuster offices was, I stepped outside after that meeting and just sat down in the middle of Rockefeller Plaza and cried tears of joy.
Oh yeah.
And
How
it was
surreal.
I'm getting
just
emotional right now.
truly,
That
it
sounds
was
amazing.
truly an amazing moment. So I think that's when it really hit that this is happening. And now, of course, finally the book gets to be out in the world, which is a whole different level of joy because I get to share it with other people.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
that's so exciting.
Right. So, Killing Sadie is a YA thriller. Can you give us your elevator pitch for this novel?
Yes. So, as an English major, math is not my strong suit, but Killing Sadie is simple math. We have one homecoming queen, 2 dead bodies after a barn party gone wrong, and 3 friends doing their best to explain to the police exactly what happened, but we have infinite reasons that every single one of them is lying.
Dun dun.
Love it.
Intriguing.
I should have added that. I should have added a little musical element.
Yeah. Totally vibe with you as well. Like I may teach, but math, I do not teach the math. So like
Nope, not a strength. Not a strength.
all right. So what was the very first spark of Killing Sadie? Was it a character? Was it a twist that you thought of that maybe kind of fleshed out the rest of the book, or just maybe a single what if kind of question?
Yeah, so I think the idea started percolating a bit when we did move from New York City back to Ohio. And just that comes along with a lot of nostalgia. I was spending a lot more time in my old hometown, which was sort of a strange thing because, when you return to your hometown, you find if you've been away, it's not the town that's changed, it's you that have changed and how you sort of interact with it. And so it just got me thinking a lot about growing up in my hometown, growing up in this small, lovely little bubble of sorts. And I was a theater kid in school, so I had this very active dramatic imagination, and I was always a bit disappointed that nothing dramatic ever happened in my town, like that it was so nice and normal. And so I think the idea behind this started to percolate there of what if all of those worst case scenarios, or these dramatic things that I used to imagine actually happened. What would actually happen in a town if something like this were to go down, and then telling that through the teen point of view.
Interesting.
Just
Giving
a
like a
natural
little
fit.
Woodsboro from Scream, kind of vibe, small town.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Small town.
Growing up,
Big
growing
drama.
up in a small town, I kind of resonate with that.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Okay, so we really love hearing about an author's creative process. So we're curious, did you put together a mood board for Killing Sadie? And if not, what would you put on a mood board? Like, are there any aesthetics, colors, or even any songs that capture the vibe of Killing Sadie for you?
Yes. So I have done mood boards in the past for prior novels. This is something that's very common in the author world. This is actually the 5th book I've written. And it is the first book I've ever gotten published, which I also always feel like is important to talk about because it's a long road and it is very normal to write a bunch before something, really sticks. So
Sure.
I've done mood boards in the past, but for Killing Sadie, I had playlists for each of my characters. Now, this is the first time that I've done that. And so each playlist was, in a sense, its own audio mood board because it's writing multiple POVs and keeping them all straight. But I think for Killing Sadie, the mood is very sort of early 2000s nostalgic in a sense, in part because that's when I was in high school, elder millennial here. Guilty as charged.
All of us.
But I think it varies by the character. So Jane, for example, who's kind of our alt-rock twin, hers would lean a little bit more 90s, a little bit more grunge. She would be into like the vintage concert tees, but she's also into old movies, so that's very black and white. And then for Sadie, it's more pop princess type of style. There is a lot more bright color. There is a lot more kind of what's on trend. What are we thinking about? A lot more stars, sparkles, that sort of thing for her, definitely.
We would love to hear your playlist though. If you did, and if you put it together for us, I would love to hear it.
Oh, for sure.
Yes, I would be happy to. It's a really fun mix of different things, and it became so much a part of how I thought about who I was writing, especially writing for the character of Ben, for example, who is polar opposite in life experience to the life experiences I've had, kind of thinking about how he gets into his
get into his
football
headspace.
tough guy, golden boy kind of headspace. Yeah.
Totally.
All right. So while we were reading Killing Sadie, we actually talked about this after we finished reading it. It was giving a lot of Riverdale, Pretty Little Liars vibe. Like those are the kind of shows that we were thinking about when we were reading it. Why do you think mystery thrillers with darker themes continue to resonate with younger audiences? And what drew you to write in this genre for your debut novel?
Yes, I love this question. It's so great, especially because I was absolutely obsessed with Pretty Little Liars when it was
Oh my
on.
gosh,
And like
yes.
all the way through, I mean, it was on for years. And so even like
Yes.
after I had graduated college, I would go over
Right.
to a friend's house every, Tuesday night or whenever it was on. And we would get together after our, first sort of real world jobs, if you will, and
Yeah.
watch the show. And I think that speaks to both how it relates to teens having an interest in this, but also how this genre, and even with teens as central characters, like really becomes something universal, because
Yeah.
once you are no longer a teen, you have still lived that experience. So I think there's always an element of kind of coming back to our past selves in that.
Right.
But for teens particularly, I think they're being drawn to this sort of darker subject matter, and I certainly was as a teen, because everything is more intense in teen life. Like the feelings, the emotions, the relationships, so much of what you're experiencing is the first time you're experiencing that thing. And so it all feels really big. And sometimes the emotion feels outsized for what the experience is itself. But then when you can assign that emotion to, again, the worst case scenario, the most dramatic, dark thing, I think there's a sort of catharsis in that. And I think, too, as someone who was quite anxious as a teen, I always enjoyed being able to, oddly enough, escape into a worst case scenario, because it calmed my mind down a bit. Like, I can go through this experience, I can have this worst case scenario, there's murder, whatever has occurred. And then I close the book when the book is done. So there is a certainty and an endpoint that I think, at least speaking for myself as a teen, was very calming to me, even though I'm reading these horrible, dark, terrible things, and I'm sure my parents were looking sideways at the book like, I know, at least she's waiting. But I do think that really holds true, and having some distance on that now, I can really see, that was a way for me to help manage and calm those emotions and calm that anxiety a bit.
So what led you to the decision to write this in multiple POVs? Because we've talked about several of them, Jane, Ben. Is that something that you always intended, or was that something that evolved over time?
Yes. That goes back a little bit to some of the other books that I've worked on and written that exist, in my past life now. But the first few times I attempted to write a novel, I wrote it in third person. And that's because in my mind, I thought that's how you're supposed to write a novel. Like, this is what it is to write a novel. And it wasn't until I actually wrote my third book, which is the book that I had queried and got my agent with, that I had started to experiment with the first person. And that very quickly just became, for me, the most fun and natural way to write. I'm a very stream of consciousness writer, and I tend to sit down and write kind of like a freight train. I will just sit and go, and I write at a really fast, frenetic pace, and I never go back and read what I've written until the end. So the stream of consciousness style lent itself really well to sort of the type of work that I was doing. And funny enough, the book that I wrote before Killing Sadie, which again, none of these books have seen the light of day, but it was a rom-com written in multiple POV. And so I went from a rom-com to, then it was actually a discussion I'd had with my agent that she really loved the first person POV. And she said, this tends to work really well with rom-coms and thrillers. Have you ever thought about writing a thriller? And that's when kind of all of these ideas that had been percolating sort of came together as one. It was like, yes, this makes perfect sense. And then especially for a thriller where everyone is lying and there are all of these tiny little details, it just makes for a much more fun and interesting and fast-paced read when you can actually be inside the minds of each of these teens.
Yeah. I feel like we all definitely experienced how that happened. You it just kind of like sucks you into the world, and you start paying attention to all the little details. It's great.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
I love that
to
there
hear
was
that.
3.
Yeah.
I know.
Well, and I think I was actually having this conversation with Ethan a couple days ago about just like a different novel. I was like, I would love to get this person's POV. I would love to get this person's POV. You just start thinking about that when you're reading novels because there's so much going on. I want to hear what other people, like what they're thinking. And the fact that we
Yes.
got this from the three teens, there's vastly different three teens. Like, that was very interesting.
It
Yeah.
was.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah, I
so
can
happy
definitely
to
say.
hear that.
Yeah, I can definitely say mission accomplished there, because I can tell you, like, we were texting on behind the scenes, like,
Yeah.
what did you think of this,
Yeah.
from this different POV? It was great.
Yeah. Sending each other
amazing. That
like
is the
our
goal.
wild theories.
Yes.
It was fun. Okay, so as we've mentioned, there are three main POVs, all with unreliable narrators, because they're each trying to hide something, which makes you question their version of the story. You also introduce other characters that are morally complex and whose intentions are kind of unclear at times. So, what drew you to writing characters like that? And why do you think young readers gravitate towards those kind of characters?
I think it's because the idea of morally gray and complex characters is something that, as you grow out of your teenage years and enter into adulthood, you sort of stop associating that with teenage life. I think it's very easy for us to look back and either overly simplify or romanticize, or just sort of have, a simplified idea of what it was to be a teenager. And one of the fortunate things for me, having sort of come of age during a time when blogging was taking off, there were very early versions of social media sites, AIM, etc. I have very immediate access to a lot of what I was actually writing about as a teen. I kept extensive journals. I had these old defunct blogging sites. And so being able to go back and actually read, not just wonder, how did I feel about that when I was 16, but actually read, to my occasional
gosh.
horror, what
Oh, wow.
16-year-old Rachel actually felt about that. It was this really technicolor reminder that moral gray areas exist in spades when you're a teenager. Moral complexity, you're dealing with a lot of issues and coming up against these questions of your values and your morals, but also what agency do you have as a teen? You want more independence at that stage, but you're also still very much in an environment that doesn't necessarily allow for a lot of that independence.
Right.
So all of that just kind of came to life for me all over again, and it just became so clear that, not only did these teens need to have those types of challenges that are real to teenagers and probably more real today than even when I was a teen, but also that's also the age when you start to realize, oh, the adults in my life are not perfect. That's the age where you really might start to come up against these challenges from your parents, or seeing your parents as human beings, not just as your parents. And the same being true for, the police officers who are questioning these teens, that there is a lot of kind of breakdown of the idea that if this person has this role, then they are good. And if this person has this role or does this job, then they are bad. And so that was a really interesting thing to play with. And also, I think just a very real part about growing up is realizing, oh shoot, no one actually knows what they're doing. You think there's an age where everyone suddenly magically figures out, oh, you're an adult, and therefore you know what to do. And that's just not true. And I think it can be really scary, but also sort of liberating as a teenager to realize, wait a second, the adults in my life don't actually know more than I do. Honestly, we're all living for the first time. So that was definitely where the interest in those types of characters came from.
It's interesting that you say the journal things. I actually kept a journal in high school, and I have read it as an adult, and it's kind of cringy.
Oh
is
my-
it? A little. It's so cringy.
Well, while you were talking about that, I was thinking, thank God my MySpace page doesn't exist anymore. 'Cause that would be so embarrassing.
Oh man,
Space is coming back. MySpace is coming back.
I
They
just
better not
heard
revive
that. I just saw that and I was like, no. I can come back through a lot of trends that had their value, but that I don't think we really need that again.
I don't.
Right.
We don't
Who
need
asked for that?
I don't know.
Please don't reinstate my old page.
No.
Yeah.
Yes, I would like to formally request, if MySpace is bringing it back, that if you had a page more than X years ago, it's just automatically deleted for,
I hope so.
the sake of your own
I'll
dignity.
co-sign that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Seriously. Okay, so we're really curious. Which character's voice came to you the easiest to write, and which one was the hardest?
I think Liz, who is Sadie's best friend, was the easiest voice.
Okay.
And that was honestly from the very first line of the book that just came to me, popped into my head, and suddenly I knew exactly who this character was.
Okay.
And so she, I think, was easiest because a lot of her kind of emotional volatility, etc., is more closely related to how I remember feeling as a teen. So she's a representative of a lot of the most intense emotions and insecurities and those type of things that I felt as a teenager. And so it was both cathartic to write her, but also she did surprise me in a lot of interesting ways. My characters surprised me. They sometimes do things that I had zero plan for them to do, and then I just am like, oh, I guess you're doing that now, so I guess this is the type of person you are.
We're done with it.
So it was fun to have her surprise me, because I also think there are certain ways, she's also in some ways who I wish I had been, in that, as you learn throughout the book, she speaks her mind, and she is a little bit sassier to authority figures who she doesn't feel are treating her well. And that's something that, as a kid who would have, wept hysterically if I got a B-, questioning authority was not really my jam.
Yeah.
And so it was fun to write a character who maybe, although she, has a lot of intensity and depth and a lot of challenges and struggles she's dealing with in her life, she also had these certain elements that I always admired about, more outspoken friends, for example, that I had. Yeah. So she was probably the easiest to access. And then, perhaps unsurprisingly, Ben was the hardest to write, because his life experience is the most vastly different from my own, but also the way he changes and how his personality shifts, and depending on if he's talking to a male police officer or a female police officer, that was something that was really important to me to dial into and kind of inhabit the space of what it would feel like if your worldview has never been questioned and suddenly this woman is quote unquote disrespecting you, and how that would feel for him. So he was the hardest to write, but also in some ways oddly the most fun and rewarding, not because I approve of him, but because it was sort of this understanding of, oh, I'm having this now conversation with a person who behaves this way and has this life view. And it was so interesting to actually inhabit that and figure out, okay, is there any way that I can also figure out, can I have empathy at all for this person who simply has never been presented with a world in which he isn't the center of the universe, so why would he believe otherwise? And that was a very interesting, challenging thing to work through with Ben.
Yeah, that's so interesting to hear that process. So I mentioned earlier, middle school teacher here, so I'm familiar with the YA readers, and they're incredibly savvy. They often gravitate towards stories that entertain while giving them something to think about as well. Killing Sadie explores themes like identity and, like you mentioned earlier, agency in the stories that we tell ourselves. How did you strike that balance of exploring darker themes like that are included with Killing Sadie without making it feel like an after-school special and preachy?
Yes. So this is one of those questions I mentioned earlier that you all had some amazing questions that I've not been asked yet, and this is one of those, and I was so excited to have the opportunity to chat about it. So thank you. It's such a thoughtful question. And I think a lot of it came from just, again, having almost this dialogue with my younger self and having access to those emotions and writing this book for, in many ways, the girl that I was, and knowing and having a lot of empathy for like who I was, what I needed then, where I was able to access what I needed, and also where, I was left sort of feeling like I was floundering. So that was a piece of it. And then I also, after thinking about this, because again, I hadn't been presented with this question and I was really giving it some thought of like, where else did this come from? And I was an RA in college. I was a resident assistant. So that means, like, for folks not familiar with the wide world of resident life, but when I was a junior and senior in college, I lived in a dorm with the first years and sophomores, and I was responsible, in many ways, for the girls on my floor. So I had, 15 or so students, and I was sort of their advisor, the person they, went to if they needed help. And we did a lot of extensive training for that to make sure that we were prepared to be both peers, but also a peer that could be trusted. And I think, yes. And I think that played into a lot of this because I bore witness to a lot of very intense and challenging situations and was in a position sometimes where someone was coming to me for help with something that was, I had to figure out how do we both keep this person safe, but also not present them with this black and white, well, X or Y, here are your choices. Now you're in a vulnerable position, but also you have to make a decision. Also you have to think about the moral and ethical aspects of blah, blah, blah. So I think drawing on a lot of that experience and just knowing the foundational level of trust that's needed to be open and have those conversations figured in a lot to this, and also came in a lot with, I was very intentional about what tropes I wanted to avoid. There are no inappropriate relationships with teachers. There are no inappropriate these certain tropes that from time to time pop up. I mean, we were talking about Pretty Little Liars earlier, which is perhaps named for some of its tropes. But But it was important to me that while this is obviously a story about murder and everyone's behaving terribly, this is not really a redemptive tale. It's fun, it's camp, it's entertaining, but we are also very intentional about what is and isn't healthy or appropriate behavior in a relationship. What does it mean when something makes you uncomfortable? And everyone else says, you shouldn't feel uncomfortable. This is wonderful. And how do you kind of manage that when your own feelings about a situation differ from what someone else thinks you should feel? So all of those things came into play, I think, and it made me very happy to hear you say this. You know, it's not preachy, it's not after school special, because it's still really just written for fun and entertainment, but also with the understanding that you should be able to look at this book and be like, oh gosh, if any of these things about this relationship seem familiar to me, that's something I should, red flag, waving white, like that's something I should think about and figure out, you know, do I need to do something about this, or does this remind me of a friend in a way that, you know, inclines you towards some action?
We definitely thought you did a great job with the balance.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate hearing that.
It's very sincere and, you know, very relatable.
Intentional,
Yeah, and intentional. Yeah. Okay, so if readers only remember one thing after finishing Killing Sadie, what do you hope that is?
I hope their first thought after finishing it is, I need to give this book to my friends so that they can read it and we can talk about it.
100%.
That is the first thing I hope.
Definitely. Yeah.
But I think then what I hope they actually take away from it is, the idea of what is truth is super complicated, and perhaps I should give some more thought and empathy to the friends in my life, the people in my life, knowing that we all have really different perspectives about, you know, things that we're experiencing in life together.
Yeah.
So those are the two things. Oh my gosh, someone else needs to read this so I can talk about it. And okay, maybe the idea of the truth is more complicated, and maybe I should, you know, make sure I'm having empathy for my friends who may be having different life experiences than I am.
Yeah.
That's great.
Well, we recommended it to each other, and actually,
yay! I'm so glad.
My older sister and her partner love thrillers, and so I actually recommended it to them, and so they'll be listening in once the audiobook is out.
Oh, I love that. Special shout out. Thank you all for listening. Thank you all for reading.
Yeah, and it's the best part, being able to talk to someone about it and see what their take was or what their crazy off the wall theories were.
Especially with a story like this. We were talking for days.
Yes, the theory comparisons are the most fun parts, and I have heard some theories from people who read early versions of Sadie. I'm like, gosh, that would have been a great idea. I'm like, that's not what actually happened, but wow, that is twisted. You're clever. I read thrillers.
Okay, book friends, that was the end of our first bonus episode with Rachel Peterson. Thank you so much, Rachel, for joining us and giving us a behind-the-scenes look at Killing Sadie. Rachel, please let our listeners know where they can find you and how they can get their hands on their very own copy of Killing Sadie.
Yes, absolutely. So you can find me mainly on Instagram at Rachel Peterson Author and rachelpetersonauthor.com. And you can get your hands on Killing Sadie anywhere and everywhere books are sold on August 4th. And you can, of course, also just go to simonandschuster.com, type in the title Killing Sadie, and purchase it online from whoever your favorite bookseller might be.
Perfect. And do you have any upcoming events that you would like to plug? If there's anything upcoming.
Yes. So there are a couple different places that you can see me coming up. If you happen to be local to the Northeast Ohio area, you can see me on launch day, which is August 4th at the Twinsburg Public Library in conversation with Mindy McGinnis. And then a little bit later in September, on September 11th, you can see me at Talking Animals Books in conversation with Katie Burnett in Grapevine, Texas. And I'm so excited for both of those events.
Yeah, that's perfect. For a lot of our Texas listeners.
Yes.
That's the majority of our listenership. So awesome.
Well, thank you again, Rachel, for letting us know. And remember, everyone, the launch of Killing Sadie is tomorrow, August 4th. So go and grab your copy so you can join us for part 2 of this interview, where we will go into all the spoilers. We can't wait to discuss this with you all.
That's a wrap for Books Between Friends today. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you in the next chapter.